Chapter 21, Wind Release Jutsu. It took just 10 days for Fujin to learn the 5-rank E Wind Release Jutsu. With one more month of vacation still remaining, he started training for the rank D Jutsu. He revamped his plans thinking, my initial plans were to learn in order of their importance, but since I'm able to learn at such a quick pace, let's just learn in the order of ease of learning them. So let's do Breakthrough Jutsu first. And follow it up with Dust Cloud Jutsu and Gale Surge. On getting all the required data from the library, he began the training for Breakthrough Jutsu. The initial process was very similar to Gale Jutsu. Only, the amount of chakra he had to gather was larger. The winds generated needed to have much more power. Also the winds had to be made sharper to cause damage. On his initial few tries, the result was only as good as Gale Jutsu, but he could clearly see where he should improve. In merely 15 minutes, he was able to expel a stronger gust of wind from his mouth. He noted, it ain't very powerful yet, but its damage should be damn good if paired with a fire jutsu. Anyways, this jutsu will require a lot of work. The process of gathering chakra as well as the process of converting chakra into wind should be faster. The chakra gathered should be larger as well to increase the damage done. He practiced it for 7 days, until he got the hang of the jutsu. He also tested it on a poor tree, which resulted in it losing the majority of its leaves and many branches. His thoughts were, that's good. Though it probably won't kill anyone, it can easily injure most genins. The next day he grabbed the scroll for Dust Cloud Jutsu and memorized it. This jutsu was incredibly easy. Its process was similar to Breakthrough Jutsu, just that it had to be focused on the ground to lift the dust above. It also had some aspects of wind levitation jutsu to ensure that the dust cloud existed for a longer time. He was able to raise a dust cloud on his very first try, however it lasted a very short time. Properly incorporating the wind levitation aspect took a few hours. But by the end of the day, the progress was sufficient. The next day, he began training for Gale Surge Jutsu. It was almost the opposite of wind retrieving jutsu. Here, he had to distill the air around him with his chakra, and then suddenly release it up to 3 meters in a direction. In a way it resembled the almighty push of Nagato. Of course the power was extremely lacking. This jutsu didn't really provide a very good defense. However, Fujin's reason for learning this jutsu was due to a couple of ideas he had with it. The first being, to increase the range and power of this jutsu, and the second was to be able to release wind in every direction around him. That way this jutsu could become incredibly disruptive. If the range and power is increased, then it'll be perfect to create a nuisance on a battlefield, whereas an omnidirectional release would be helpful in case he's ever surrounded by enemies. It again took him only a day to learn this jutsu and practice it to an acceptable level. On the next day he started learning the wind explosion jutsu. He treated this jutsu as a practice for his Raise-Non later on. Here he had to gather the wind and shape it into a spherical form and infuse a little chakra in it. That was the difference between it and Raise-Non. Raise-Non was purely made of chakra, whereas this jutsu was majorly made of wind and only had a small % of chakra in it. Since the amount of chakra was low, these spheres could be launched at the enemy. Since he was already practicing for Raise-Non, this jutsu became much easier to learn. Within a couple of hours, he was able to get the jutsu right for the first time. After trying it for a few times on nearby trees, he concluded, though the chakra infused in the winds explodes, it is not what causes the damage. The damage is caused by the winds, which become lethal after the explosion. They can cause a large amount of cuts and some of them can be very deep. I tried to infuse more chakra to increase the power of the explosion, however it didn't work as the wind sphere couldn't move as fast or as long distance. Even if I increase the amount of winds to maintain the ratio of chakra to wind, the sphere still becomes very bulky and no longer has the same speed. He sighed, I guess upgrading it would be a very complex task. Anyways, I should instead try to change my point of view. Perhaps I should try to combine this jutsu in the wind clone jutsu. If the wind clones can explode in this manner, then it will transform into a killing strike. The practice for wind explosion jutsu continued for a week. After the first day, Fujin stopped improving the wind sphere and instead focused on increasing his speed of forming the sphere and the speed of launching the spheres. His goal was to be able to launch these explosive spheres one after another without any breaks. That way, though it won't be a killing blow, it'll still cause a lot of damage to anyone who couldn't dodge or block these spheres. It could also cause death due to having lost too much blood. However, he was still quite far from reaching that stage. On the following day, he started learning the propelling winds jutsu. Here the task was to gather the chakra in his hands and burst it in a direction. That burst would apply an opposite force on him and move him in the opposite direction. This technique could be used to change directions quickly. However, in terms of movement on land, this technique was quite inferior to body flicker. Its advantage lay when the user's feet weren't on ground, as this jutsu was very convenient to use while in air. Thanks to all his training over the past month, creating bursts was very easy. The issue was in controlling the amount of movement he had. Also, his footwork needed a lot of adjustments. To employ this jutsu, one had to be very light on his feet and allow himself to be pushed back by the burst. While he could control the amount of force of the burst, the force applied back changed in accordance to how much pressure was applied on his feet. That was incredibly hard to control. On the third day of its training, he managed to bypass this issue by using two tactics. The first was, he would slightly jump in the direction where he wanted to go to and then use the burst to push him there. The second was to use the burst and then force his feet off the ground instantly, which would make him move out of the way. However, the control for the second one was lacking a lot. It would cause him to flip in the air a couple of times, which could be dangerous in a fight if the enemy followed and persisted with his or her attack. He trained to improve his control over this jutsu for 6 days, after which he was happy with his progress. That night after dinner, he decided to sit down and think about his current status. He thought, in the last 32 days, I have learned 5 rank E wind release jutsus and 5 rank D wind release jutsus. Including the 3 basic ninjutsu, body flicker, and shadow clones, I now knew 15 jutsus in all. He analyzed his jutsu further and concluded, my wind clone jutsu makes the normal clone jutsu redundant. I should completely drop its usage. Gale jutsu 2 doesn't need any more work. It can cover footsteps adequately, and in fights, breakthrough jutsu is much better. That leaves 13 jutsus. Even though I have learned them, if I talk about truly mastering a jutsu, then I have probably mastered just one jutsu, which is body flicker jutsu, on which I spent 10 whole months. Next, I should focus on mastering these wind release jutsus, especially to perform them without hand signs. Even though the body flicker jutsu took 10 months to master, if I have learned anything in the last 1 month, it's that either my talent in wind nature is extremely high, or these wind release jutsus were very easy. So mastering them shouldn't take very long. I could also upgrade my substitution jutsu by substituting with my wind clone rather than nearby logs or other objects. Other than that, I could also try to combine wind clone and wind explosion jutsu. Similarly, I should experiment trying to use body flicker and wind propelling jutsu simultaneously. If body flicker jutsu could freely change directions, then it will be extremely lethal. And I still have to learn to strengthen my weapons using wind chakra. After thinking about these ideas, Fujin decided to think how he could get his hands on rank C jutsu. He thought, I'm not sure if I can get access to rank C and rank B jutsu anytime soon. I could ask Genki, but even if I am successful, I don't think he'd give me more than 2 or 3 jutsu. And that'll also attract a lot of attention. I could ask Hiruzen for access to higher sections in the library after the 3rd year exam, but I'm doubtful that he'd agree. Even if he did agree, I will probably be monitored when I enter the library. And if they see me reading those high-ranked jutsus, they may have someone keep an eye on me. That would mean that I can't practice ninjutsu secretly like I do right now. And if they sent someone good enough to avoid me from sensing him, that would mean my skills would be known to Hiruzen and soon to Danzo. He sighed, leave it, let's follow stability. There's no point in taking such a huge risk. If I master all my current jutsu and also a few earth release jutsu and can't progress any further, then I can consider graduating early. Over the past year, he had thought quite a bit about graduating early. His thoughts were, initially I thought that graduating early would attract a lot of attention. Perhaps it still would in Naruto's generation. But right now, graduating early seems to be highly supported and even encouraged by teachers. In the last 2 years, there were many who graduated after their 4th or 5th year in the academy. A few even graduated after the 3rd year. I guess the village wants to have new ninjas join in their ranks as soon as possible. Which is why it may be encouraged right now. Though if someone graduates at 6 or 7, then it'll still attract a lot of attention. During this vacation, Fujin had almost entirely focused on ninjutsu. His routine was, work out in the morning, and then ninjutsu training the whole day. When he ran out of chakra, then he would practice meditation or practice shuriken throwing. Everything else was halted. Fujin decided to continue practicing his wind jutsus in the last week of vacation. However, he started additional training. He started trying to hit his wind clones with shurikens in order to improve his skill at it. Though he wasn't sure whether to be upset about his shuriken throwing skills or be happy at his clone's speed and maneuverability, as he didn't manage to hit his wind clone even once. However, he did improve at a rapid pace. Chapter 22, Fuinjutsu. The 3rd year started after the vacation. This year, Genki focused on other crucial aspects of a ninja apart from fighting capabilities. Fujin was a bit surprised that he didn't push for any more advanced jutsu, but on thinking for a bit, he understood more than half of the class isn't able to keep up. Considering that he asked me to learn wind nature, I'm guessing he gave similar advice to others who could keep up. This way, the struggling ones would catch up and the students who are performing well can reach the next level. I guess they want to ensure that every single kid from this class becomes a capable ninja to fill up the void left by the dead. Still, from his speech, it seems like everything will be taught in this year itself. After the lectures were over, Fujin went to the library. He went in section E and picked up the scroll named Introduction to Fuinjutsu. He recalled reading it a couple of years back. He read it once again, this time properly. On reading, he analyzed, Fuinjutsu contains 2 parts. The first is the writing part. However, this has 2 parts as well. First, the language. Fuinjutsu has special symbols which I have to understand before attempting to make seals. I will need to learn to draw each symbol properly as well as infuse my chakra in the mentioned manner. Any mistakes would make the seal fail and could cause unintended complexities if the seal did something else. This is actually very similar to hand signs, just that the number of symbols is much higher. The symbols serve various functions. The main function I can see is its ability to produce an element. There are symbols for each of the 5 elements, and symbols which can suppress or enhance them. There are also symbols to control time and space. A simple storage seal has a lot of space symbols, whereas a complex one will not only have space symbols, but also time symbols to ensure that time slows down in that storage seal. The second was the logic part. This part is very similar to coding on Earth. Since I know coding, this part is easier for me. However, it ain't much of an advantage. Coding is pretty easy to learn. I'm sure the brighter kids from my class could pick it up within a week or two. After the writing part, the next part was to mold my chakra to create what the seal is used for. For a simple sealing scroll, I would have to create that storage space with the help of the symbols and also set up the conditions for activating the seal. Sigh, this is pretty complicated. Anyways, let's start. I should start with the symbols, but there are hundreds of them. It'll take months if I try to learn them all. So I'll just pick a seal and learn its symbols. That way I could monitor my progress. After analyzing all the seals in the scroll, he decided to learn the most used seal, the storage seal. It used 16 types of symbols. Majority of it were different types of space symbols. A few increased the amount of space in the seal, some restricted the space in order to maintain the boundaries, some ensured that the space stayed stable, and so on. He drew the required symbols perfectly on a spare scroll and also took down notes related to it. He had seen a few others do the same in the library, so he wasn't worried about getting into trouble, though he was very surprised at Konoha's magnanimity. Once that was done, he left the library. He went to the market and transformed in an alleyway. After searching for a bit, he found the shop he was looking for. There he bought the special ink required for Fuinjutsu as well as special scrolls for the same. The scrolls were made of a special material. It was much sturdier and could apparently last for centuries if not damaged by external force. It could easily bear the chakra applied to it while seals were inscribed on it. The special ink, on the other hand, would make infusing chakra much easier. Trying to make the symbols with normal ink was a lot harder to do. However, there was another substitute for this special ink. That was the blood of a ninja. These items were quite expensive though. The scrolls cost 60 ryo each and a small bottle of ink cost 100 ryo. He bought 5 bottles of ink and 5 scrolls to practice. He sighed thinking, I hope these last a few months at least. I only have 4,370 ryo left with me. He then went home and on reaching there, he made a shadow clone. A couple of months of crazy physical training, high amount of meditation and constant ninjutsu training till he dropped due to lack of chakra had resulted in a high rate of growth of his chakra. It had increased by around 25%. It implied that he could now make 2 shadow clones if he wanted to. However, both will barely have any chakra to do anything. If he made one shadow clone with exactly 50% chakra, then that shadow clone could last till his chakra dropped to 32% of Fujin's max chakra. So effectively, it had more than doubled the shadow clone's usable chakra. Fujin and his clone started the work on the first symbol. After trying it for half an hour, Fujin confirmed, as I thought, the amount of chakra needed to practice this is quite low. This is good news for me as my shadow clone will last a lot longer. Calculating from my clone's remaining chakra, I'd say he'll be able to last 4 hours while practicing these symbols. After an hour's practice, he dispelled his clone. On dispelling it, he got all the memories from the clone, along with a minor headache. He created another shadow clone. This time the clone practiced the symbol for 2 hours, took a break of 2 hours, then practiced it again for 1 hour, and then took another 1 hour break followed by 1 hour practice. Fujin went out to practice shuriken throwing on a wind clone and increasing the radius of his chakra field. He didn't practice any ninjutsu, as practicing it with only half his chakra wouldn't last very long. After 7 hours, he dispelled his clone. This time the headache was a bit worse, but still bearable. However, recalling Hiruzen's instructions, he decided to sleep. He was very happy with what he had done today. After waking up early the next morning, he thought, excellent, the experiment was successful. Now that my shadow clone can last 7 hours and practice these symbols for 4 hours, I can leave my shadow clone at home and it can keep practicing Fuinjutsu while I'm at the academy. I guess my chakra needs to increase by another 20 to 25% so that my clone could practice for 7 hours straight. Still, I need to decide what the clone should do in the spare 3 hours. He thought for a bit and then it clicked him, yeah, why not? I should buy a few cooking books for the clone to learn. In the past 2 years I have learned to make various breakfasts, but I didn't learn to make a proper lunch or dinner as I didn't have much spare time. This seems the perfect opportunity to learn it. Alright, today, after the academy, I'll buy the books. Happy at the possibility of finally being able to eat delicious meals, he decided to analyze his daily routine, so with this sorted, I will continue to do my physical training in the morning. During lectures my clone can practice Fuinjutsu while my main body pays attention for important lectures and work on my chakra field in the remaining time. After the lecture is over, I'll have to return home, dispel the clone and take a short, probably an hour's sleep. Then I can practice my ninjutsu and shuriken throwing. And the year continued in this manner. Genki taught a lot of practical knowledge that was needed for ninjas. And Fujin continued his hard training. Fujin did note that the class was a bit more serious this year. He thought, I guess his one-on-one talks had a good effect. After 6 months, Fujin was able to do the rank E wind release jutsus with no hand signs, only the wind clone needed a single hand sign. Among rank D, he could do wind propelling jutsu without hand signs, however the rest required 1 or 2 hand signs. 23 days before the exams for the 3rd year were up, he managed to do all but 2 without hand signs. Only dust cloud jutsu still required a couple of hand signs and wind clones still required 1 hand sign. Similarly, shadow clone 2 had dropped to just 1 hand sign, the clone seal, which he wasn't able to do without hand signs. His breakthrough jutsu and wind explosion jutsu now were able to do much higher damage and all the other wind release jutsus had been mastered to a certain extent. It took his clone 3 months to master those 16 symbols and another month, to successfully make a storage seal. It took another month of practice to be able to do it comfortably without any mistakes. He had spent 4,000 ryo on the materials till then, leaving him only with a little over 2,000 ryo with him. He had created 5 proper sealing scrolls. Each time when he bought the materials, he had bought it from different shops under different disguises. Of the 5 shopkeepers he met, he had observed that one of them seemed greedy and with loose morals. He thought, I can't continue the expenditure on Fuinjutsu. Probably another 4 months before I'm totally broke. So I'll have to sell my scrolls. Trouble is, whom to sell? I can't give out my identity and I'm not sure if any shopkeeper will agree to buy without knowing the seller. Sigh, I'll have to approach the one with low morals and greedy nature. Luckily, one of the shopkeepers fits the bill. Unless he has put up a facade, so I should take some precautions. Preferably, I should send a clone under transformation jutsu. Chapter 23, The First Deal. Over the next few days, he had his shadow clone spy on the shopkeeper. Genki's training for stealth was really helpful during this period. His name was Jeng. He was probably in his 40s. The clone observed his actions and his movements to see whether he is a hidden ninja. He had already tried to sense his chakra, it was merely at the civilian level. Fujin wondered if at some point in the past, Konoha conducted a drive to unlock chakra of a lot of people. He also observed his dealings with other customers, where he keeps his inventory, where he keeps his cash and so on. The spying was quite successful as on one lucky instance, he heard Jing bargaining with his supplier on the price of some of the items. On hearing them talk, he understood that the supplier sold an explosion tag to him for 500 ryo and storage scroll for 1,200 each, while he sold the storage scroll for 1,500 ryo and the explosion tags for 750 ryo to his customers. After being sure that he was a safe target, he sent his shadow clone with the 5 scrolls. His clone took the appearance of a middle-aged man and approached Jing when no one was in his shop. On seeing him approach, Jing put up a kind smile and said, "Hello, what do you want to buy?" Fujin's clone replied, "Hello, I'm not here to buy, but to sell." Hearing that, Jing was quite surprised. He raised an eyebrow and asked, "Sell? Who are you?" Fujin's clone replied, "You can call me Zoro." Jing noticed the fact that the man in front of him asked him to call that. He then asked, "What do you want to sell?" Fujin's clone paused for a moment, and stared in his eyes. He then said, "Storage scrolls." Jing, trying to gain an upper hand in any negotiations, said dismissively, "I already have 3 suppliers for storage scrolls, why should I buy from you?" Fujin's clone smirked and replied, "Because my scrolls are better." That statement got Jing interested. He asked, "How? And I'll inspect your scroll first before buying from you." Fujin's clone maintained his smirk and replied, "Suit yourself," and handed him a scroll. Jing took the scroll and invited him to a room inside the shop. On the way, he asked, "So what's the name of your company and who is the person in charge of it?" However, he was dismissively answered with, "You don't need to concern yourself with it." Hearing that, Jing thought, "Oh, a secret organization?" So either he is someone who doesn't want anyone to know that he can make storage scrolls, or he has a secret organization behind him which probably does some shady work. Hee, I'll make a ton of profits from this sheep. On reaching the room, Jing started inspecting the scroll. Fujin clone's claim wasn't empty. A standard storage scroll has 10 storage seals in it. However, the one he made had 12 seals in it. When he saw Jing inspecting the scroll, Fujin's clone thought, it isn't difficult to make 12 seals in a single scroll. You just have to draw the seals closer to each other. Actually, if anyone wants to make an optimal storage scroll while keeping the size of the scroll the same, then he could make 25 seals in the scroll. However, for the ones who mass-produce these seals, 10 is the optimal number. The reason is that many buyers don't need more than 10 seals in a scroll. And for the ones who want more, the producers would profit more if they bought more scrolls. It also resulted in less effort needed to make the scroll. So it had become an optimal number for them to make maximum profits. However, I don't have any such restrictions. I just want to make some money to continue practicing Fuinjutsu. On looking at the number of seals in the scroll, Jing had similar thoughts. However, he could also think even further than Fujin, as he had a lot more experience and information. He analyzed, while just having 2 more seals might not seem such a big deal to normal people, but I know the ninjas who want to buy scrolls having more storage seals in them. Just last week one Jounin was talking about the convenience of having a storage scroll with more seals. I can sell this scroll to him for a much higher price. Probably even over 2,000 ryo. Then he looked at Fujin and thought, Now the only question is whether he is aware of its value or not. After a few moments his expression became unpleasant and he angrily said, "Your scrolls only have 2 seals more. And the quality of each seal is the same as others. 10 seals are already more than enough for a single scroll. I will buy it from you, however I'll pay you the same price as I pay to my suppliers." Knowing the kind of guy the shopkeeper was, Fujin's clone smirked again and said, Now, we both know that ain't true. There are too many ninjas who will willingly buy scrolls with more seals." Jing, however, dismissively replied, "Yes, but they won't be willing to pay higher. Still, seeing that you could add 2 more seals, I'll pay you a bit more. Instead of 1,000 ryo, I'll pay you 1,100 ryo." Hearing that, Fujin's clone scoffed and said, "Do you think I live under a mountain? The standard scrolls are supplied for around 1,200 to 1,250 ryo. Even if you consider the least at 1,200 ryo, just considering that it has 20% higher seals would raise the price to 1,440 ryo. Not to mention the fact that some ninjas might be willing to pay more." Hearing that put a lot of pressure on Jing. He internally sighed at the numbers thrown by the other party. The haggling continued for a few more minutes. Jing took advantage of the fact that the opposite party wasn't willing to reveal his origins and used that point to decrease the buying price to 1,150 ryo. After the haggling was over, Fujin's clone thought, "Sigh, that was some intense haggling. This fellow is much better at haggling than me." But either way, while he may think that he made a profit, just being able to sell these scrolls for over 1,000 ryo each is more than enough for me. He then smirked internally, thinking, well, I still have one more advantage to play. While he may be a better haggler, I have the advantage of being the lone supplier of the 12 seal storage scrolls. I am so interested in looking at his final decision. After deciding the price to be 1,150 ryo, Jing asked, "So Zoro, how many scrolls do you have to sell?" Fujin's clone didn't reply, instead he placed 4 scrolls in front of him. Looking at that, Jing was at a loss of words. He thought, just 4? So including the one I inspected, there are only 5. What is he playing at? Seeing that the seller wasn't saying anything further, he showed an enraged expression and asked angrily, "Only 5? You wasted all my time for only 5 scrolls." Fujin's clone calmly replied, "The boss has sent a few like me to other shopkeepers to sell it too. Depending upon the price each shopkeeper gives for these scrolls, the future sales to those shops will be decided." After hearing that, Jing's expression was really a sight to see. Fujin's clone had a laugh internally. It was the first time in their negotiation that Jing had lost his composure. Fujin's clone's thoughts were, while I don't necessarily need a higher price, doing this would cast much lesser doubts on me. Also, the existence of a boss behind me will keep this fellow from going overboard. Jing, however, got lost in his thoughts. Damn. What to do now? By buying 1 scroll for 1,150 ryo, I probably won't get any more scrolls from him in the future. But if I pay high, and others still pay higher, then I still might not get any in the future. Still though, a boss and more people like him. Are they trying to change the whole storage scrolls market? He thought for a bit more and then asked, "Will you be selling all your scrolls to only the one who buys it for the highest price, or others as well?" Fujin's clone replied, "We will be selling it to many shopkeepers. Only the amount of scrolls we sell to them would depend on the prices they offer. Of course, the ones who offer lower than average might not get any. But I'm not privy to the exact plans. Jing analyzed for a minute and then sighed. He thought, buying it for a low price would mean killing the goose that drops the golden eggs. But how much should I buy it for? I don't want to pay a lot for it. Otherwise my profits won't be enough. Let me go with 1,500 ryo. That should be enough to earn higher off them than normal storage scrolls. He then offered a price of 1,500 ryo per scroll. They completed their deal and talked a bit about how and when future deals would happen. Fujin's clone walked out of the shop with 7,500 ryo. He handed the money to Fujin in an alleyway while he wandered off a bit and dispelled himself after confirming that there was no one around. After looking at the cash, Fujin's thoughts were, wow, am I really that good at negotiating? However, after getting his clone's memories back, he thought, nope. I am probably closer to a novice rather than a master. It was just that the final bluff was too much of a temptation for him to ignore. Probably, he also thought that a powerful organization might be behind me, which threatened him a bit. Well, whatever, this is good cash. I should consider selling scrolls often to him. He then went to a few other shops under different disguises to buy materials. He bought 30 bottles of ink, 25 scrolls, and 200 blank paper tags. The blank paper tags cost 10 ryo each. So in all he spent 6,500 ryo on the materials. He then bought some meat and returned home. He thought, now that I do have some cash, I should definitely increase my meat consumption. The meat business here is entirely dominated by the Akimichi clan. All the shops which sell meat belong to them. I wonder if it is because they are good at it due to economy of scale, or if they were given monopoly over this business when they joined Konoha. After that day, Fujin began learning other seals too. He learned a few basic ones like heat seal, cool seal, hard seal, soft seal, shock seal, and wet seal. These seals used elemental symbols. However, the number of symbols required was much lower as compared to a storage seal, as these did very basic things. The heat seal could only be used to warm a room, while the cool seal absorbed heat from the surroundings to make the room cooler. Shock seal could apply a small electric shock, but it was very harmless too, as Fujin could bear that shock without any issue. Hard seal was used to harden a surface or an object, whereas soft seal did the reverse. Wet seal was used to gather the moisture from the air and make the surface it had been stuck to wet. All these seals had to be made on a paper tag, and to use it, it would have to be applied on a surface and be activated. The elemental seals had a requirement of the creator being able to use those elements. But since these seals were very basic, he could do it despite not having mastered fire, water, and lightning natures. In all, it took him 4.5 months to learn all these seals. During this time, he also started selling 20 storage scrolls to Jing every month for 30,000 ryo. He kept the amount low so that the major suppliers of storage scrolls won't be annoyed by him and try to find him. On the other hand, Jing was very happy too, as he could sell these scrolls for around 2,300 ryo. By the time third year's exams were up, Fujin had saved over 100,000 ryo. Chapter 24, Graduation Exam. In the third year, Genki had focused entirely on the basic skills. It made this year a lot more fun. After having taught one skill entirely, he used to come up with games so that everyone would get used to using it. For instance, after teaching how to move stealthily, he gave everyone 29 tags with their roll numbers written on it. Everyone had to put these tags on the backs of other 29 students and avoid others putting those tags on their own back. Thanks to Fujin being a censor, no one managed to put any tag on his back. The few who tried to sneak up, got a punch or an elbow to their face. While hunting wild animals had resulted in most students making some really funny faces. Killing an animal didn't create an issue for everyone, though Fujin did sigh thinking, I never thought that my first kill in this world would be a freaking rabbit. The fun part, according to Genki, which he enjoyed the most, was having everyone cut open the animal they hunted, clean it and prepare it for cooking. An act that disgusted most of the students, including Fujin, as he had never done anything like this in his earlier life. Only Nobu was completely unaffected. And in order to make everyone learn cooking properly, Genki banned bringing lunch to the academy for a few days. Their lunch was the wild animal they cooked. Later in the year, he also introduced tree climbing as a chakra control exercise for his students. In this manner, the year progressed. 1 week before the final exams, Genki dropped the news that surprised Fujin. He thought, while I did know about it, for the announcement to be made this suddenly is surprising. Genki had announced, if there is anyone among you who wants to attempt the graduation exam, then let me know within the next 3 days. However, by the end of the day, Genki did regret announcing that right in the morning. He sighed, damn, I should have announced it when the lectures ended. No one paid attention to today's lectures. After going home, Fujin thought hard about it. On analyzing, he concluded, there's still a lot more for me to learn. Right now my wind jutsus, basic jutsus, shadow clones, body flicker, shuriken throwing and taijutsu has progressed to the level that I'm satisfied with. But I still have to learn earth release jutsus. And also need to work on sword skills and genjutsu. As for fuinjutsu, though it has been coming along well, I still haven't started on the intermediate level seals which are available in section D of the library. And there's also Raise Non still left to master. Also, while graduating will ensure that I won't have to waste time in the academy, but since Konoha currently is suffering a shortage of ninjas, I suppose my free time might be curtailed rather than getting more time to train. Also the missions might have more risk than usual, especially with the third war still fresh in everyone's minds. Alright then, I won't participate in it. While the top scorer not attempting the graduation exam might raise questions, it's better than dying on some rank C mission gone wrong. However, unlike Fujin, the other kids from his class were perfectly brainwashed by the will of fire. And hence many were interested in participating in the graduation exam. However, knowing that they won't be able to pass, many parents didn't allow their children to take part in the exams. In the end, there were 7 students who decided to participate in the graduation exam. Yori, Nobu, Teru, Hoka, a civilian kid, and the 2 from Abarame and Heitake clans decided to attempt the exam. Fujin did see that Genki was a bit disappointed in him not attempting the graduation exam. But he was relieved as Genki didn't talk with him on the matter. The graduation exam was around a week after the third-year exam. The third-year exam went as usual. A few more parameters were added to the exam based on the skills that Genki had taught in this year. This year, the reward from the Hokage was also dependent on the graduation exam performance. That pretty much meant that Fujin won't get any rewards for rank 1. So he decreased his performance slightly in the written exam and once again didn't give his all in the ninjutsu exam. So in the end, he only ranked 4th. Teru ranked 1st, followed by Nobu and then Hana. Fujin was actually very grateful that Hana wasn't attempting the graduation exam. While he wasn't aware of the reason, it meant that he wasn't the only one with high scores who wasn't attempting the graduation exam. Unknown to him, however, Hana was extremely upset that her parents didn't allow her to become a ninja so soon. A week later, the graduation exam was conducted. For the students from the elite classes, the exam was very similar to normal exams. Only, it was more comprehensive. The main addition to the exam was a 50-point exam that provided students with various scenarios that they would face and asked what they would do in those scenarios. Except Nobu, everyone else struggled in this exam. In Taijutsu, only Hoka and Teru performed above par, while Yuri and Nobu were barely average. In ninjutsu however, Teru, Yuri and Nobu displayed why exactly they deserved to be genins. Yuri perfectly displayed 2 rank C jutsus, Fireball Jutsu and Phoenix Sage Fire Jutsu. Teru was able to perform jutsus of 2 different elements. He was able to perform 1 rank C Water Gunshot Jutsu and 3 rank D Jutsus, Ground Shaking Jutsu, Headhunter Jutsu and Stone Shuriken Jutsu. Nobu showed off his variety by performing 1 rank E Jutsu of each of the 5 elements. In addition, he was also able to perform higher rank jutsus of fire nature, which was his affinity. He performed 2 rank C jutsus, Fire Dragon Jutsu and Flame Bullet Jutsu. After all the tests were conducted, the performance of all students were analyzed. From Fujin's class, only Teru, Yuri, and Nobu graduated and became genins. Due to his better performance than Nobu and Yuri in Taijutsu, he ranked first in his class. From the batch which was 1 year senior to Fujin, 11 students graduated and 28 of their seniors graduated as well. However, Fujin was oblivious to all these developments. As soon as the summer vacation began, Fujin went back to his ninjutsu training. He was satisfied with his progress in wind release and decided to start training earth release jutsus and hence visited the library. A/N, this is probably the last time during the academy when it'll be theory heavy. But since the previous feedback mentioned that there was too much theory, so I won't go into explanation of each and every jutsu. If Fujin or someone else decides to learn them later, I'll explain the jutsu then. He looked at every earth release jutsu in section E and section D and made a list. The first thing he noticed was that Konoha had a lot more earth release jutsus as compared to wind. Though it wasn't really surprising considering the low number of wind release users. The list of earth release jutsus he created was Rock Throw Jutsu, Rock Shield Jutsu, Stone Bracers Jutsu, Swift Earth Jutsu, Earth Release, Transformation Jutsu, Trapping Jutsu, Mud Moat Jutsu, Earth Clone Jutsu, Rock Thorn Bed Jutsu, Stone Shuriken Jutsu, Headhunter Jutsu, Pebble Barrage, Ground Shaking Jutsu, Earth Tremor Sense Jutsu, Earth Mound Creation Jutsu, Mud Interceptor Jutsu, Earth Military Movement Jutsu, Stone Breastplate Jutsu, Mud Weight Jutsu, Earth Release Camp Jutsu, Earth Release Note Jutsu. His first thoughts were, no Earth Wall Jutsu? That's a rather simple jutsu, to be ranked higher. Even the Iron Skin Jutsu of Kakuzu isn't here. I hope it is there in higher sections. He then began reading each and every jutsu and started analyzing them. It took him around 2 hours to go through each and every one of them. He concluded, the earth release jutsus are more comprehensive than the wind release jutsus. The only point where it is bad is that the offense is lacking a bit. Surprisingly, many of the jutsus in this list have a similar potential like wind ones. However, there is one big drawback. Most of the earth release jutsus, especially the ones with high potential, will be severely restrained if the fight is over a water body. Now that I think about it, IWA is pretty lucky to not share any border with Kiri. Otherwise they'd be in very passive situations in the wars. Anyways, I can ignore all offense-oriented earth release jutsus. For defense, rock shield jutsu is a good option. It probably is an inferior version of earth wall jutsu, so it can be upgraded later. I also wonder if I could use the hard seal to make the shield more durable. For trapping, mud moat jutsu is a good option. It creates a 6 feet deep moat with 6 feet radius around the user. It should serve as a base for that rank A swamp jutsu which Jiraiya had. I don't recall the name though. As for movement, earth military movement jutsu is a must learn. It allows traveling through the ground for short distances. Having another way to escape is always good. Earth release, camp jutsu is pretty handy too. It can make a cave within mountains. There are a few small hills in the village, like the one where there is a waterfall. I could try this jutsu somewhere near there. Also, these 4 jutsus make a neat combo. I could use camp jutsu to build a cave within a mountain. Then use rock shield jutsu to hide the entrance. Prepare a moat around the mountain, and if anyone manages to find the cave, then I can escape with earth military movement jutsu. He began his training for the earth release jutsus. While he hadn't honed his earth nature as much as wind nature, he still had honed it a lot. He could crumble boulders to dust in just a few seconds. That's why he managed to learn them very quickly. However, they were a bit tougher to learn when compared to wind release jutsus. He learned rock shield jutsu within a few minutes and then spent a couple of days on it to increase the size and durability of the rock shield that he used to raise from the ground. He also attempted to apply the hard seal on the rock shield he raised. It increased the durability of the shield. However, applying the seal and activating it took around 1.5 seconds to pull off, something he might not have in a fight. The camp jutsu was learned within a day. Though the cave was a bit dusty, he could just use breakthrough jutsu to clean up all the dust. He could also use the rock shield jutsu to cover up the entrance if he wanted to hide. Though he had to leave a small space open in order for air to circulate. He didn't bother perfecting this jutsu as there was no need for it right now. The next was the mud moat jutsu. It had an aspect of water nature as well. So it took him close to a week to learn it. He would need to improve his water nature if he had to improve this jutsu further. So he decided to leave this matter for his future self. And lastly, he practiced earth military movement jutsu. This one was quite difficult to learn. The jutsu involved moving through the ground like he is swimming. So he had to soften the ground a lot to be able to do that. It took him 11 days to pull it off successfully for the first time. It took another 2 weeks for him to be able to move around more freely. He was only limited by the amount of oxygen he had underground. The softening of the ground resulted in some oxygen entering underground, however it was very limited. He stopped when he was able to move 100 meters. He thought, alright, the earth release jutsus have been learned. Though I still need to work more on rock shield jutsu and earth military movement jutsu. However, I can do that slowly over the next year. Next, I need to learn chakra flow. He went to the library to learn about it. Chapter 25, Chakra Flow. He visited the library, and searched in all 4 sections he had access to. Surprisingly, he didn't find a single scroll on what he wanted. He thought, this is surprising. Does it mean that they are kept in a higher section or do they not provide that technique for normal ninjas? While leaving the library, he analyzed for a bit more. Yeah, that might be the case. Infusing chakra into weapons isn't that big of a deal. If I recall right, most samurai were able to do it. However, in Konoha, Asuma was the only one I recall to do it. And Danzo too was able to do it, but his method was different. Anyways, I suppose I'll have to try it myself. I don't think Genki or his friends might know this. On the way back to the mini forest, he thought of various ways to do it. His first thoughts were, let's just try to flow my chakra through a kunao like I try to do it when trying to cut a leaf. Only, instead of trying to cut the kunao, I'll try to make its edges sharper. He then tried to implement that trick, however he had many troubles in doing it. He had instantaneous success in what he was trying to do as he was able to imbue his kunao with his chakra on his first try. However, the chakra amount that got imbued was very low, and even after trying to infuse more chakra in it for 2 days, he didn't improve much. Also, while the kunao's sharpness and penetrating capabilities improved, it wasn't much and he didn't make any improvements over the couple of days. He thought, what a bummer. This seems to be a dead end. I guess having a chakra blade might aid, but something seems wrong. Perhaps I'll improve if I stick to this, however it'll probably take years. I need to think of another way. He thought for a few hours, and then it clicked him. He decided to go the Hunter x Hunter way. He thought, yeah, that's right. I could try the similar way as in Hunter x Hunter. I'll first try to release my chakra and coat it all over my body. And then try and extend that coat to cover a kunao I'm holding. While the method is very inefficient, it should allow me to learn it faster. Once I'm able to do it, I'll have to practice doing it without coating my body and directly infusing chakra into the kunao. Coating the entire body with chakra wasn't something any ninja preferred to do. The reason was simple: insufficient chakra. Doing it would exhaust the chakra of the user very quickly. From what Fujin could recall, apart from the Jinchurikis, only the Raikages coated their body with chakra. Others would at most coat a body part or weapons to enhance them. Fujin began training in the new way. And it was very exhausting. In merely 7 minutes, he ran out of chakra. However, he could see that he was making some progress in extending his chakra to his kunao. It was slow, but a steady growth he observed in 7 minutes. He guessed that in around 10 attempts, he'll be able to perfectly coat the kunao with his chakra. However, with the chakra exhaustion, he could probably only train it around 3 or 4 times in a day. Not to mention, there was much more to do after coating the kunao with his chakra. Not wanting to waste weeks on this, he decided to buy soldier pills. After resting for a couple of hours, he went to his home to get cash and then left to buy the pills. He transformed in an alleyway and went to a shop that sold soldier pills. Soldier pills were extremely useful for a ninja. When he read it the first time, he was a bit amazed by it. A top-quality soldier pill could provide around 30 times the chakra of an average jounin. And it didn't do it right away, but provided the chakra in small parts, every hour, consistently over 3 days. It also released enzymes which stimulated the ninja to stay awake for 3 days. That's why someone who consumed a soldier pill could fight for 3 days straight. Unknown to Fujin, there were also better soldier pills, but they were custom-made for top ninjas and not available for everyone. Fujin decided to buy soldier pills of medium quality. These were mostly used by Chuyunins. Fujin's own chakra reserve now was much higher than an average fresh genin. It was probably better than an average genin. In the next year, his chakra reserves should grow to the same level as the weaker Chuyunin Academy teachers. Despite not yet having Chuyunin level chakra reserves, he still decided to buy medium quality soldier pills because of how exhausting the training was. He bought 5 pills, for a total of 10,000 ryo. The prices did make him curse out and also thank the fact that he had started learning Fuinjutsu. The next 3 days, he trained a lot. On the first day itself, he was able to coat his kunao with chakra. He then charged it with wind nature, and that had an immediate impact on the kunao's sharpness and penetrating power. The chakra extended the kunao's range by 5 centimeters. He experimented a bit with his new ability. He thought, excellent, I can cut through branches like I am cutting through thin air. While I can't cut a tree, it's because the size of the kunao is too small. With a sword even that shouldn't be an issue. The kunao is also able to penetrate deep within a boulder. I recall Naruto and Asuma being able to penetrate through a boulder in one of the fillers, so I could try that. Honestly, if an enemy underestimates me and tries to block the kunao, then he'll be very badly injured. But I do need to reduce the amount of chakra I need to do this. The next part of the training should be to directly try to coat the kunao without coating my whole body too. So how should I proceed? The thought for a bit and then concluded, just directly trying to coat it will probably end up in failure. I should instead try to coat only my hand with chakra and then try to extend it to kunao. I guess I could also try to train in how to infuse chakra in my punches in this way too. While it won't beat Tsunade level, the power of chakra-infused punches should completely outmatch the power of normal punches. He then proceeded trying to coat only his fist with chakra. It took a few hours to be able to do that. He thought, okay, this wasn't so hard. He then tried to extend that chakra to kunao. While he was able to extend it, the amount of chakra he could now extend to the kunao was much lesser. He thought, I see, since I'm just coating my fist, that's why the amount of chakra I'm extending is much lesser. So basically I'll have to concentrate more chakra in my fist. He then started to concentrate more chakra in his fist. This was much harder than expected. It needed a very high level of chakra control to be able to do that. Luckily for Fujin, he had trained his chakra control a lot. It took a day for him to be able to double the chakra he could concentrate in his fist. Not satisfied with the amount, he kept on trying more. However, soon 3 days were about to be done. Hence he decided to rush back home before it. As soon as it was 3 days, exhaustion hit him real hard. The side effect of using soldier pills was bad. Luckily it was only a short-term exhaustion and didn't have any long-term effects. He straight away went to sleep, without setting any alarm. When he woke up, he looked at the clock and thought, oh, it's 8:10 a.m. Wait, I fell asleep yesterday at 4:30 p.m. So I slept for over 15 hours? Damn, the exhaustion hits hard. Also I'm very hungry right now. After brushing and cleaning up, he grabbed a couple of ration bars and ate them. He did his morning workout, though it was 3 hours late, and decided to go out to eat meat for lunch in Yakiniku-Q. He rested for the rest of the day, and the next day, continued his training. It took another 3 days for him to double the amount of chakra he could concentrate in his fist again. He thought, wow, I wonder how strong my punch is now. Let's test out on a boulder. On punching the boulder, a lot of cracks appeared on the boulder, but Fujin was screaming internally, bloody hell. This hurts like a bitch. After a few moments, he checked his fist, and thought, wow, there are no visible injuries. Though it hurt a heck of a lot, it didn't cause any bleeding or injury. It only caused a few small scratches. I guess I have really become strong. He spent the next 15 days increasing the amount of chakra he could infuse in his kunao and also making the chakra much sharper. While just infusing wind chakra in it had made it very potent, he had to shape his chakra to form a thin edge that aligned with the edges of his kunao for maximum effect. By the time the vacation was over, his kunao could penetrate through 3-4 meters wide boulders and get stuck in the fourth boulder. And the range of his kunao, due to chakra flow, was increased by 15 centimeters. However, he noticed that once he was able to increase the amount of chakra infused in the kunao and make it much sharper, it started to deteriorate the condition of his kunao. 2 days before the vacation was over, the kunao with which he was practicing with crumbled. He sighed thinking, well, it was a kunao I picked up in the forest. I wonder if a new kunao will last longer. I guess I'll need to buy a few kunao later on. I should also check on the prices of chakra blades. The day before the academy started, he visited the best weapons store in Konoha to look for chakra blades. He hadn't transformed this time and just went in as an enthusiast. The reason was that he wanted to show an interest in it and the fact that the shopkeeper was a retired ninja whose chakra was almost twice that of Genki. The prices, however, shocked him. He thought, what the fuck? A small chakra knife costs 2 million ryo? Heck, why didn't Kakozu steal Asuma's chakra blades instead? And though they don't have any chakra swords, the details in the book say that the cheapest one costs 7.5 million ryo. The prices got him thinking, damn, what should I do? The costs are too high. If I focused a lot on Fuinjutsu, and sold a lot of seals, I might be able to make that much in a year or two, but it'll attract a lot of attention. Not to mention that the chakra swords have to be custom made, so trying to get it with a random disguise will most probably not work. I really doubt that the village won't pay any attention to such a big purchase. If I wait till I can earn by doing missions, I doubt I can earn this much till I am able to do rank missions. That's a long time away. He thought for a bit more, and then it clicked, that's right, I do have the option of asking it as a reward from Hiruzen. This year, I'll train a lot to dual-wield swords. And even show off my training a bit to show everyone how interested I'm in swords. And Genki knows that my nature affinity is wind. So they will get the hint. Though there are two main problems. The first being that pretty much everyone will know about it. The second is whether Hiruzen will actually reward me something so expensive. He thought for a bit more, oh well, fuck it. I can bypass the first issue by asking Hiruzen to hold onto my swords. When I'm confident that I can take on Jounins, I'll ask him for the swords. As for second, if he refuses, then I will ask him for smaller chakra blades. With all the crap he talks about the will of fire, it'll be damn fun to see how he would refuse a young kid twice. Sadly, I have built a rather mature and a bit nervous image. So I can't throw tantrums if he refused me twice. Though I'll definitely have my revenge if he says no twice despite boring me for hours year after year with his brainwashing speech. If he declines, then in the future, I'll fund Naruto's pranks by supplying him with various seals. Then I'll enjoy watching the mess he makes of Konoha. With those thoughts, he laughed like a devil. If Hiruzen was aware of Fujin's thoughts, he'd have probably shivered. A/N, apologies for the delay. Deciding how to go about chakra flow took some time. Chapter 26, Getting a Rank C Jutsu. The next day, the fourth year in the academy started. Not having paid any attention to the graduation exam, and wanting to get the information, he decided to go a bit early to the academy. He reached the class at 7:45 a.m. On reaching, he saw that 24 kids were already there. And there were 3 new faces. He looked around the class and didn't see Teru, Yuri, and Nobu in the class. He then went to Hoka, sat beside him and asked, "Morning. What happened in the graduation exam?" Hoka's mood first soured as he hadn't passed. But on realizing, he looked at Fujin in disbelief. You don't know? Fujin shook his head. Hoka continued, have you been living under a rock? Fujin replied, nope, just under trees. Hoka gave him a deadpan expression. Fujin asked again, well, are you gonna talk today? Hoka then showed a sad face and answered, I failed. Only Teru, Nobu, and Yuri passed. Fujin, having expected that, nodded. He then asked about what happened in the exams. Hoka gave a summary of what all happened. Despite already knowing the possibility, he sighed at the fact that those three could perform rank C jutsu. He thought, sigh, I guess being in a top clan or being backed by a crazy old fellow has its benefits. Fujin then asked whether those three formed a genin squad. However, Hoka replied, no, Teru and Yuri were placed together in a squad with someone a year older. No idea where Nobu went, but I haven't heard about him after the exam. Fujin thought, I see. I guess Danzo inducted him into the route. Though I am surprised that he didn't take Nobu when he was 3 to 4 years old itself. He then asked, so what's up with the three new guys? Hoka dismissively replied, no idea. Seeing Hoka unconcerned about the new guys, Fujin thought, he isn't the right guy to ask this. He is very aloof if it doesn't involve taijutsu. But this much information is enough. I wonder if I could use this info to get a few C-rank jutsus from Genki. After the talk, Fujin decided to continue sitting there for the rest of the day. While he didn't make much of a relationship with his classmates, due to constant spars, his relationship with Hoka and Teru was better than others. Surprisingly, today, Genki didn't enter the class alone, but was also accompanied by an old man. When he entered, everyone stood up and greeted him, as he was the headmaster of the academy. After entering, he first made some small talk. Then he started talking about the will of fire. And finally, he asked the students to try to graduate this year. Fujin was quite surprised with this. He only had one thought, wow, they are really desperate. After he left, Fujin thought, I guess not participating this year is not an option. Then again, I have learned most of the things I can. Only genjutsu and learning swords are left. And the second book of Fuinjutsu is still left. Still, if they are this desperate, I might actually have a shot at chakra swords. After that, the headmaster introduced the three new kids. He said, since 3 of your classmates have already become genin, we have transferred 3 students from other divisions to your class. So be friends with them. The 3 kids introduced themselves to the class. They were the top 3 among the remaining 400 students of their year. Some students were happy to have new classmates, some felt like they didn't need anyone else to join in, so the reaction was mixed. Fujin's thoughts were, I see, so in this way, they ensure that the other students don't become too pressured due to few of their classmates becoming genins. The 3 kids will ensure that the absence of the ones who graduated isn't always felt, but they will still serve as a benchmark for the rest. Also, the new kids in this class will have to work much harder. If they keep up, they'll become quite strong in the future. It's a pretty smart move. While Fujin was acknowledging the ingenuity of the move, one person in the class was extremely unhappy, and almost crying too. That person would be the class teacher. Genki thought, I taught everything I had to teach to all these kids last year itself. All I had to do was to wait until they absorbed everything and passed the graduation exam. But now I have to again teach these new kids everything. While he was depressed and lost in his thoughts, he had a thought that horrified him. Wait, so if this year more students pass out, does that mean more students will join the class and I will have to teach them again? His shoulders dropped on having that thought. He really was depressed. He sighed, "This isn't what I signed up for." After introducing the new kids, the headmaster left. Genki then announced the syllabus, and it surprised Fujin once again. Genki said, "This year, your main focus will be to master everything I taught you guys in the last 2 years. The 3 basic ninjutsu as well as the basic skills I taught you. In addition to it, I will also teach you 5 new rank-E jutsus. They will be Fire Release, One Jutsu, Wind Release, Gale Jutsu, Lightning Release, Static String Jutsu, Earth Release, Rock Shield Jutsu and Water Release, Fish Spit. These jutsus aren't compulsory for you to learn in order to graduate, however, they will be very helpful to you, if you are able to use them. I've already explained nature affinities to you last year. So I'll check your nature later, and at the very least, you'll have to learn the jutsu of your affinity. Learning all 5 will help you if you decide to graduate early. Your former classmate, Nobu, was able to perform all 5 of these jutsus. That's why he was able to graduate so early." Mentioning Nobu riled up the class and made them very competitive. Genki was satisfied with the reaction. He thought, "It's nice to see them so motivated. I should be thankful to Nobu for performing this during the previous year's exam. Else I might not have decided to do this." Fujin thought, "Well, this is surprising. I didn't think Genki would teach jutsus of all the 5 elements. But it isn't much of a concern for me. I already know 2 of those 5 jutsus." After the class was over, Fujin grabbed a sparring sword from the academy and started practicing swinging it. He had 2 basic ideas, which is why he wanted to learn using swords. The first one was to infuse wind chakra in his swords, make them incredibly sharp so that he could cut his enemies down, even if they block it with their weapons. It would make him incredibly deadly in close combat. The second idea was to shoot out slashes or thrusts at mid-range, similar to what Zoro and Mihawk did in One Piece. Of the 2 ideas, the first one seemed very realistic. Fujin was confident in being able to do that very soon. He wasn't quite sure about the second one though. His memories regarding the small events in Naruto had grown a bit hazy by now, so from what he could recall, there was only one ninja who could use brute force at mid-range. That was Guy while performing his morning peacock and evening elephant. However, even if he wasn't able to send slashes flying with brute strength, it could be replicated by launching a slash of chakra instead. Like the samurai are able to do. And it could be improved further by charging that chakra with wind nature. After practicing for an hour, he sighed at his sword skills. He thought, even though I have watched a lot of swordplay in my previous life, I don't really have a proper way to train it. Oh well, I'll bother Genki once again. So he kept the sword back, and went to find Genki. On finding Genki, he saw Genki talking with a fellow teacher. He waited for a bit. Genki, after seeing Fujin, cut short his talk and asked Fujin why he was here. Fujin said, "Sensei, I want to learn how to use swords. Can you teach it to me?" Genki almost cried internally. First, that headmaster made me teach 3 new kids everything again. Now this brat comes and asks me to teach him how to use swords. As if I don't have any other work to do. And he doesn't even attempt the graduation exam. He gathered himself and sighed, "Whatever, I can't say no to him. But I do need to have a talk with him. I want him to graduate this year. If he stays for another year or 2 and if others start taking a cue from him and ask me to teach more, my life will become hell." Fujin was surprised at Genki sighing. He wondered, what's up with him? Wasn't he always very enthusiastic when the students wanted to learn more? Genki then replied, I don't use swords much. But I have a couple of friends who do. I'll arrange you some sessions with them. While he was saying this, he thought, I am so glad that I made so many good friends, on whom I can offload my students. Fujin nodded and thanked him. Genki then asked a few more things. And then moved on the topic to graduation exams. He asked, Fujin, what are your thoughts on graduation? Fujin sighed internally at the question, there really is no other option this year. He put up a thoughtful expression and said, I will be attempting it this year. Last year I wanted to attempt it too, but I got a bit scared as it was told to us at the last moment. And I didn't know what to do. He then showed a slightly yearning and slightly sad expression and said in a sad voice while looking down, but after hearing that Yuri, Teru, and Nobu were all able to perform rank C jutsus, I guess it was a good thing I didn't attempt the exam. I would have made a fool of myself if I did. Fujin maintained that expression, while hoping that Genki takes pity and gives him some rank C wind release jutsus. On seeing Fujin's expression, Genki felt some sympathy for him. He thought, an orphan with no clan becoming a ninja is pretty difficult. Not having the resources that a clan provides puts them at a huge disadvantage. I myself struggled a lot due to coming from a civilian family. He sighed a bit and decided, all right, I should cheer him up and give him a rank C jutsu. Great Breakthrough Jutsu is a very basic one for wind users. And I'm sure that Lord Hokage would agree too. But first I need to check up on his progress. He tried to cheer Fujin up a bit, and then asked, we checked your nature affinity more than a year back. How far have you progressed with it? Fujin replied, Sensei, I managed to cut the leaf in two. I learned Gale Jutsu from the library. I can also do Breakthrough Jutsu, but I'm still improving it. Genki was a bit surprised at the answer, I didn't expect him to come so far, and even practice jutsus by himself. Then again, he was very diligent. Also rank E and D jutsu aren't hard to perform. But since he has learned these two, Great Breakthrough Jutsu should become easier for him to learn. He then said, that's good. Can you show me how well you can do them? Fujin nodded and they went to the training grounds. Fujin first performed Gale Jutsu properly. Though he could perform it without hand signs, he made all the hand signs while showing it to Genki. Genki nodded and said, that's good. Show me Breakthrough Jutsu, try it on that tree. He pointed to a nearby tree. Fujin once again made the hand signs, but he made them at a slower speed. He also controlled the power of the jutsu. It only broke off a few leaves and a few twigs. After performing the jutsu, he thought, well, this much should be enough. If I had gone full power and turned this tree into a naked tree with plenty of deep cuts, a certain someone would have gotten very interested in me. Genki was impressed with Fujin's performance, that's good. Though the power is a bit lacking, it's sufficient considering that he is only 9 years old and didn't have anyone to teach him. But his talent in ninjutsu is definitely not as good as the 3 who passed. Genki thought a bit more on whether he could help Fujin more, but he couldn't come up with anything. He concluded, oh well. Even if he doesn't become a ninjutsu expert, he still is a sensor. Not to mention that his taijutsu is solid too. And though his ninjutsu ain't very good, the wind element makes fire stronger. So, between his sensor skills and wind jutsus, he will provide a lot of utility to his squad. So becoming a special jounin within a decade shouldn't be an issue for him. He might even become a jounin if he grows well. On concluding his thoughts, he said, nice work Fujin. Both the jutsu have been learned very well. Though you should work on increasing their power. Fujin nodded and said, yes sensei. Genki continued, Don't worry about rank C jutsu. I'll see if I can get one for you. Fujin quickly thanked him. The next day, Genki, after taking Hiruzen's permission, handed the scroll for Great Breakthrough Jutsu to Fujin. He said, "This jutsu is the next stage of Breakthrough Jutsu. Learn it properly, it'll help you to graduate." Fujin thanked him again. Chapter 27, Kenjutsu. From the next day, Fujin restarted his Fuinjutsu practice by leaving a clone back home. He hadn't practiced it much in the last 2 months as he couldn't leave clones behind when he did ninjutsu training. He still had a few basic seals to learn. Fujin guessed that it'll take another 2 to 3 months to be done with them. Then he could move on to the next scroll. One dilemma he had was whether he should leave 1 or 2 shadow clones back home. Since the time he had started to practice shadow clones, his chakra had grown to over 3 times. According to the scroll, if a shadow clone could use 2/3 of its chakra before dispelling, only then it is considered a proper shadow clone. According to that logic, Fujin could make only 1 proper shadow clone. However, practicing Fuinjutsu for 7 hours didn't require that much chakra. So he could leave 2 shadow clones if he wanted to. On analyzing, he decided, for now let's just leave 1 clone. I'll see how the academy goes for the first week and then decide. The day after that, Genki handed Fujin the scroll for Great Breakthrough Jutsu. Fujin started learning it the very same day. It was very similar to Breakthrough Jutsu. Just had a lot more power. He managed to learn it on the very same day. Though there was still a lot of room for improvement. The power had to be increased a lot, and hand signs had to be reduced to 0. He recalled, "I remember Orochimaru making a mess of the forest in the Chuyunin exams with this jutsu. So there's a lot more I need to do to increase its power. But at least this jutsu is learned. I'll keep the scroll with me for 3 weeks, and then return it to Genki." Later in that week, Genki checked everyone's affinity. Unsurprisingly, most had the fire affinity. The remaining were split between the earth and water affinities. No one had the lightning affinity, and Fujin, whose affinity was already known, was the only one to have the wind affinity. Genki also explained the jutsus to the class. The lightning one basically just formed strings of lightning that could shock anyone it touched. But it lacked power and was pretty harmless overall. The water one involved spitting out 1 small jet of water. Fire release, one jutsu however surprised the whole class. While it was a simple jutsu that involved producing a heat ray with 1 finger, it was the most basic jutsu from a set of 6 jutsus. Each of the 6 jutsus built up on one another, and the last one was a very powerful rank A jutsu. This information got Fujin very interested in the technique. Right now, he had the knowledge of only 1 rank A jutsu. Having another he could learn would increase his fire power a lot. However, he controlled his desire for the jutsu due to 2 reasons. He hadn't yet trained his fire nature, and this jutsu didn't seem like it could be enhanced with his wind release jutsus. In all, the 5 jutsus could be used alongside the basic skills Genki had taught. Fire release, 1 jutsu could start fires. Fish spit jutsu could douse it. Gale jutsu could cover tracks. Rock shield jutsu could defend and create a cover to hide. And static string jutsu could paralyze small animals for a minute or 2. So they were pretty handy. Next week, Genki announced, "Today we will be learning about swordsmanship. I have invited a guest teacher to guide you." Genki had thought about this after Fujin asked him to teach him how to use swords. He concluded, swordplay training can be done by everyone. So it won't be fair to only arrange it for Fujin. If someone of the 30 students have innate talent for swordsmanship, then it'll be a good find. Even if no one has interest in it, just learning how to use another weapon would be helpful for them. I'll just talk to Lord Hokage and try and arrange someone for this job. Fujin was surprised by the announcement, but on thinking more, he realized that it was very reasonable. Everyone went to the academy training grounds. On entering, they saw Genki talking with a tall, muscular guy who carried one sword on him. Genki introduced him. He will be teaching you how to use swords. His name is Michi. He is a Chuunin like me. Everyone greeted Michi respectfully. Michi first started by giving a background of swordplay. He gave a rather passionate speech about being a swordsman. He talked about the first and second Hokage using swords. He also talked about treating the sword as an extension of your body. Fujin was getting serious guy vibes from this guy. After 15 minutes of his speech, he then got to the basics of swordplay. He taught how to hold the sword, what stance to take, how to swing it and so on. Fujin paid a lot of attention to his instructions. However, not everyone was interested in it. The students from Nara, Akimichi, Inyazuka, Abarame, and Hyuga clans showed zero interest in it. After a week, Michi asked who all were interested in pursuing swordplay seriously. Aside from Fujin, only one civilian kid and one from the Heitake clan decided to practice it seriously. Michi talked to all three of them to understand more about them, and why they wanted to pursue swordsmanship and to what degree they wanted to learn it. On asking that question to Fujin, he replied, "I want to develop my swordplay as much as I can and make it my main mode of combat in close distance." Michi then praised and asked, "That's a good attitude. You'll be a fine swordsman one day. But do you have any ideas on how to proceed ahead in using swords?" Fujin wasn't sure what all options were available in Konoha. So he shook his head and said, "No, I am not aware. Can you tell me what all the paths that are available?" Michi replied, "Well, in Konoha, we have a lot of dances that go along with swords. For example, I know the dance of Crescent Moon, which is one of the strongest kenjutsu in Konoha. There are many basic styles that you would need to learn before you can do this kenjutsu." Fujin blinked, and replied with a question, "Dance?" Michi laughed out loud and then replied, "Well, they ain't exactly dances. They are just movements that have to be done in a particular pattern. That pattern helps you create some effects which are very lethal in a battle. Like some movements create after images, or make you disappear or make it seem like you ain't moving. But since those movements seem like an elegant dance, it was termed as such." Fujin put up his thinking face and thought, "Well, I obviously know that. However, the dance, while having good effects, is in itself very restrictive. A good opponent can easily disrupt those movements. Beiki could straight up defend it by having stronger defensive means. That's why that Hate guy died so easily. Though if someone learns all these styles, they could come up with a very advanced kenjutsu style, but that'll easily take a decade or more. Not the kind of time I have. I just want a straightforward approach with swords. High offensive power, enough proficiency to defend with the swords, and my agility to dodge or chase if need be. With wind chakra flow, just this much will be extremely lethal against any normal ninja." Now how to convey this to him? I can't just say that your styles are weak. I can't just say that if Madara asked you whether you can dance, and if you showed him your dance of Crescent Moon, then he might bang his head on the ground and go back to his grave. Wait, that doesn't sound like Madara. No, he might instead drop a few meteors. Yeah, that sounds like him. He then answered, "For now I don't want to learn the various dances. I just want to learn how to do a strong frontal assault with swords." He then paused for a few seconds and said, I don't know if it's possible or not, but is there any way to make the swords more lethal by using chakra or send flying slashes? Fujin had to be very careful here. After all, the library had no mention of chakra flow. So he had to present it as his own idea. Michi was initially a bit disappointed with Fujin as he didn't want to learn the various sword styles of Leaf. But he was very surprised when he heard the question, did this brat think about chakra flow by himself? Also, aren't those samurais able to send chakra flying in the form of slashes? This kid has a very innovative way of thinking. Sadly, I myself haven't learned chakra flow or samurai saber techniques. He was a bit distressed over it. Now what to do? It's super embarrassing to tell him that I don't know it. Dance of Crescent Moon doesn't require chakra flow. Also, learning it will take a lot of time and effort, which is why most of us don't learn it. He thought a bit more and finally sighed and said, what you are talking about is chakra flow. We send chakra through our swords to make them stronger. However, it is a very complicated technique and very few in Konoha know it. So don't worry about it right now. As for flying slashes, samurais are able to do it, however their techniques are a secret, so learning it will be difficult. Fujin showed disappointed expressions. He thought, wow, this guy is useless. Couldn't he at least get someone who knows that to teach me? Looking at Fujin's disappointment, Michi consoled him saying, but you don't need to worry, those are very high-level concepts and you could have an opportunity to learn them in the future. For now, I'll drill all the basics in you. Fujin nodded at him, thinking, sigh, my expectations have grown a bit too much. This guy doesn't really owe me anything. I guess having a class teacher who is so helpful increased my expectations a lot. He then thought for a bit more and concluded, well, if Hiruzen denies me chakra blades, then I could ask him to arrange someone to guide me in samurai saber techniques. Even though Michi said that those techniques are a secret, it's highly unlikely that no one in Konoha knows it. Also, now that Michi has mentioned it, I do have an excuse to explain from where I learned about it. After that discussion, Michi started teaching the basics to all three students. Later that day, Fujin bought a sword for himself. The sword was normal, but its quality was better than a normal kunao. It cost him 22.5k ryo after some bargaining. The reason to buy it was because he couldn't practice chakra flow with the sparring swords in the academy. Chapter 28, Genjutsu. The year continued in such a manner. Michi did drill a lot of basics into Fujin, which Fujin absorbed like a sponge. As for the 5 basic elemental jutsus, Fujin didn't bother to learn them for now. From the second week, Fujin started to leave 2 clones back home to learn Fuinjutsu. This doubled his speed of learning Fuinjutsu. However, in order to not mess up his brain, both clones practiced the same symbol or seal. 1.5 months after the 4th year began, Fujin was done with the basic Fuinjutsu. In this period, he also noted, since both my clones practice the same seal, it doesn't double my speed of learning. After dispelling both of them, I get the perspectives of the clones. Hence the base formed is much stronger, but it comes at the cost of the learning speed. In all, I think that my learning speed has increased by around 60%. He analyzed for a bit more and concluded, the optimal use of shadow clones will be when each of my clones learn different things. However, the one attempt I did caused me an insane headache. So while this ain't the best use I can make of shadow clones, I guess this is the most optimal path for me. I suppose having a sturdier base would be more important than learning speed. After learning the basic seals, he decided to learn more advanced seals from the next version, which was in section D of the library. This book had seals to store an element in it. For instance, seals that could seal fire in them. It made him wonder if the seal Jiraiya used to store Amaterasu was such a simple seal. The element stored could be created with the help of ninjutsu. However, this wasn't a necessity. Elements could be taken from the surroundings as well. Like for water, he could store water from a river in the seal. On reading the seals in the book, he realized, it looks like the seals Shikamaru used against Kakuzu are in this scroll. However, I guess what he used wasn't normal water, but instead water that conducted electricity much easier. I guess they put a lot of salts in the water, or maybe something else to increase its conductivity. Anyways, even these don't have much use in combat. It'll require very high creativity to use them effectively. He started learning those seals. 3 months after the 4th year began, Fujin managed to perform great breakthrough jutsu without any hand signs. In the next month, he managed to do the same for rock shield jutsu. However, he still had to slam his hands on the ground to perform it. He decided, I should learn to perform rock shield jutsu by stamping one foot on the ground instead. So I'll have to learn how to send earth nature chakra underground through my feet instead. He thought a bit more and concluded, it's difficult. The hand signs for rock shield jutsu gathers earth nature chakra into the hands and then it's released into the ground. In order to do it by stamping the foot, I'll have to manipulate the chakra to be released from my feet instead. But if I could learn it, it would be an incredibly annoying defense. I could make a shield with every step while I run backwards. I guess it's worth it, so I'll train later while also trying to create wind bursts through my feet. After another month, Fujin decided to start training to use 2 swords at the same time. He bugged Michi to train him with the basics for the same. He then made a point to ensure that a lot of people see him training with 2 swords. His previous sword had deteriorated a lot in these 5 months, so he bought 2 new ones. He trained for another month, but didn't have any success at reducing the hand signs for Earth military movement jutsu to 0. With only 4 months remaining for final exams, he decided to stop training the 2 Earth release jutsus and start learning genjutsu. He visited the library and began searching for scrolls on genjutsu. He found a few scrolls in section 0. Some were just on basic knowledge of genjutsu which were covered in the lectures, a few on countering genjutsu and one on learning it. He began reading the one that explained how to learn it. However, the very first sentence startled him. His first thought was how straightforward. The scroll started by stating, genjutsu requires very precise chakra control and very high intelligence, if you lack either, then don't bother. However, he soon became very skeptical. Is very high intelligence really needed? After all, Kurenai used genjutsu on fucking Itachi. He continued reading it and analyzed, I see, so a genjutsu is created when a ninja extends their chakra flow through the cerebral nervous system of their opponent to control their mind's chakra, thereby affecting their 5 senses. In this way, illusions of what doesn't exist can be fed to the opponent. Genjutsu in itself can be divided into 2 categories. First is creating a whole new environment with genjutsu. Here the opponent can easily tell that he's under a genjutsu. Itachi's Tsukuyomi or the genjutsu Kurenai used on Itachi and Kisame can be included here. The second is just to make a small change, i.e., to plant a small suggestion in the opponent. This is harder to detect, but it isn't as strong as the first one. However, when used at the right moment, this is very lethal. The scroll also talked a lot about how to extend their chakra through the opponent's nervous systems and tricks to do it stealthily. It also had a lot of diagrams regarding the cerebral nervous system. He then went to search sections D and E of the library to see if he could get a basic genjutsu to learn. However, he received a big surprise. There were over 100 genjutsu in just those 2 sections. He was shocked by it and thought, did they put everything that Uchiha and Kurama have here? He sighed at the high amount of reading and analysis he'd have to do. In order to not waste too much time, he just began opening the scrolls on the spot and reading the description and putting them back. It still took him over 4 hours to go through all of them. After reading each and every scroll, he concluded, most of the jutsus here have no combat application. It's just different ways and scenarios of using genjutsu. I guess someone like Itaki or even Kurane could easily use these after reading it once. Anyways, I don't really have any intention to be a master at genjutsu. With those Uchihas around, it's pretty pointless anyways. I just need to learn ways to counter it and that darkness genjutsu that Hashirama or Tobirama created to counter the Sharingan. Though I guess that one is a B or a rank genjutsu. So I guess I should learn a couple. Let's go with rank E double vision jutsu and rank D demonic illusion, hell viewing jutsu. Double vision makes the opponent see doubles of everything. So it would be useful in putting the opponent under a lot of pressure. And hell viewing is the one which Kakashi used on Sakura. He then read how double vision jutsu is performed. He also read a few scrolls on countering genjutsu. And then followed the usual protocol and reached a mini forest. Genjutsu training couldn't be performed solo. It needed someone to cast the genjutsu on. Otherwise its result will be entirely unknown. So he created a shadow clone to practice it. His plan was, I will try to cast a genjutsu on my clone. Once the clone dispels, I'll get all memories of what was experienced by the clone as well as my ability to cast a genjutsu. Also, the clone will try to resist the genjutsu and will try to release it. This way I can train in both casting and countering genjutsu at the same time. To counter genjutsu, a ninja had two ways. The first being to stop his chakra flow and disrupt it. And the second being to inflict pain upon yourself to break out of the genjutsu. Stabbing yourself with a kunai, or biting the tongue or any other means were fine too. Of course a shadow clone couldn't use the second way. He began by trying to affect his clone's cerebral nervous system with his chakra flow. He recalled all the diagrams he had seen and the ways to affect your opponent's cerebral nervous system with your chakra. It required extremely precise chakra control. He didn't have any success on day one. He kept practicing it, and it took him 16 days to be able to do it. After another 7 days, he was able to successfully use double vision jutsu on his clone. For double vision jutsu, after his chakra invaded his clone's nervous system, he had to affect his vision and double all inputs it received. The main point was to ensure that your chakra output is so low that the enemy doesn't sense it. His clone observed, wow, I can see doubles of everything. 2 of my main body, 2 trees for each one, even every pebble on the ground and the clouds too have doubled. Apart from that, the ground and sky seems normal. I guess because it is so large, I can't make any difference between 1 or 2 of them. But, regarding the doubles, I can't see much difference between them. If I hadn't already seen the surroundings, then I would have not noticed most of the things to be doubled. I'd just think that there are more pebbles on the ground, the forests are denser and that there are more clouds in the sky than normal. I'd of course notice the peculiarity of seeing 2 main bodies though. So I guess if I am visible to the enemy while casting this genjutsu, the enemy would understand that something is wrong. Similarly, if there are more than one opponent, then it'll be identified very quickly too. Apart from this, even though my main body did suppress his chakra as much as he could, since I'm a sensor, I could actually sense his chakra trying to influence me. He then closed his eyes and tried to sense around him. I see, since the genjutsu targeted my vision, only that was affected. If I try to sense, I only sense one main body. So this genjutsu won't work against sensors. The clone then stopped sensing and nodded to Fujin. Fujin took that signal and launched 4 shurikens on the clone. The clone saw them as 8 shurikens and thought, I saw both the main bodies toss 4 shurikens each on me and flickered around to dodge the shurikens. Fujin then used projectile control jutsu to have those shurikens chase his clone. Since he could see 8 shurikens, it was a bit tougher to dodge them. After half a minute, the clone used Gale Surge Jutsu to disrupt the main body's control over the shurikens. He then used Wind Retrieving Jutsu and pulled 2 shurikens towards himself and caught them with each hand. However, he was only able to catch one, while the other disappeared. The clone then dispelled himself and passed all the memories to Fujin. Fujin analyzed, I see. The jutsu isn't as useful as I thought it'd be. The only use is when an enemy is all by himself, and I hide around him and target him with shurikens. Even that will only work if I get him to an unknown place where he won't observe any difference in his surroundings. Also, it won't work against sensors. One very important piece of information I got is that I can sense an enemy trying to influence me through genjutsu. The question is, did that happen because I am a noob when it comes to genjutsu, or can every sensor sense this passively? If I can, then this will become an excellent way to counter genjutsu. All I have to do is disrupt my chakra before the enemy completes his genjutsu. Of course, there will be limitations for this. I don't think this way would work against Cherry-non as it performs genjutsu with only eye contact. However, I could sense genjutsu cast by others easily and disrupt it midway. Who knows, perhaps with practice, it might even counter the Cherry-non. He then resumed his practice. Only this time, his clone would stop and disrupt his chakra after the genjutsu was cast. The clone managed to get it done within a day. On the next day, his clone would attempt to disrupt his chakra as soon as he felt Fujin's chakra invading his nervous system. Surprisingly, that only took a few hours to learn. Happy with the progress, he decided to move on to the next jutsu. Chapter 29, Combat Practice. Fujin started to learn Demonic Illusion, Hell Viewing Jutsu. This jutsu was more advanced than the previous one. In its simplest form, it affected the opponent's vision and showed him the view that the caster wanted to show him. Alongside that, the caster also had to affect the opponent to trigger fear and dread. This jutsu could be improved by influencing the opponent's sense of smell and hearing too. Fujin recalled, the genjutsu that Kakashi cast on Sakura, had Sasuke asking her for help. So I guess he controlled her hearing too. I am not sure if he influenced her sense of smell too, then he could have added a stench of blood. He began practice for this jutsu. He practiced triggering his clone's fear and dread, and then influencing his sense of sound and smell. It took 7 days to get all these 3 down. He then had to work on creating an illusion, however he hit a roadblock, so what exactly am I afraid of? He thought for a bit. The only thing I fear right now is Danzo forcefully inducting me into root. But even then, it's not something I dread. I guess that's my good luck that I don't have any mental demons. He thought more, and then it finally clicked him. He cast the genjutsu on his clone. His clone allowed the genjutsu to be cast. Nothing happened for a few seconds, but then the clone saw something. There was a small black dot over the horizon, and it kept getting bigger. He soon noticed what it was and thought, fucking tailed beast bomb. As soon as he saw it, he felt fear and dread. However, having experienced it for a few days, he understood that Fujin had triggered his fear and dread. The tailed beast bomb hit him and the illusion was over. The clone then dispelled himself to pass the memories back to Fujin. Fujin thought, that went well. I guess right now, my biggest fear is dying like a cannon fodder, without being able to do anything about it. He then thought a bit more about the illusion was pretty well. However, the shape of the tailed beast bomb wasn't stable, that has to be improved. Also, the ending was abrupt. While a weaker opponent, like Sakura, might fall unconscious, a hardened ninja would definitely not be unconscious after the illusion. So perhaps it could be expanded further to give me more time to deliver a killing blow. Perhaps after the explosion, I could induce the smell of soil and blood, and maybe show the opponent an image of his own dead body. Make them think they died and are now a soul or a ghost for a few seconds. He continued working on improving his illusion. It took a week for him to be satisfied with the illusion he created. After he had learned those two genjutsu, less than 3 months were left for final exams. Fujin was progressing very well on all parameters. However, there was one important aspect that he hadn't focused on yet. He thought, alright, everything's going well. My chakra level is already on par with the weaker academy teachers. My ninjutsu and taijutsu too have probably surpassed genin level. Fuinjutsu is going well, I should be done with the current scroll in another 6 months. In Kenjutsu, basics have been learnt well and chakra flow has become much smoother. I can easily cut through a tree with my sword. Heck, I can cut a boulder too. And I have started with genjutsu too. However, I severely lack combat experience. In fact, it won't be wrong to say that I have no combat experience at all. After all, there's no danger to life or even any permanent injury in the taijutsu tournament. We aren't even allowed to throw shurikens at each other. Another important thing is battle and survival instincts. To be able to make a move purely on instinct in the middle of a fight, or to be able to sense if my life is in danger, is something that is incredibly important for any ninja. Otherwise, just a sneak attack with a shuriken is enough to kill anyone. Luckily, my instincts are much stronger due to me being a sensor, however it ain't enough. So over the next 3 months, I need to spar frequently with my shadow clone. He thought a bit more and decided, to start with, let's use wooden weapons. After I'm comfortable with it, I can move on to real ones. On the next Saturday, he went to a mini forest. After confirming no one was around, he made a clone, and decided to spar. Both he and his clone were armed with 24 wooden shurikens, 6 wooden kunao and 2 wooden swords. They stood face to face, 10 meters apart. Fujin picked up a pebble, and tossed it into the air. The pebble hitting the ground was the signal to start the fight. Since the clone was made after all the planning was done, there was no need for any dialogue. As soon as the pebble hit the ground, both Fujin and his clone jumped backwards and launched great breakthrough jutsu. The jutsus clashed with each other, creating a lot of sharp winds that broke a lot of branches. After launching the jutsu, both flickered away to stay out of the range of the jutsu. Once the winds started dying down, Fujin and his clone started observing the patterns within the winds. Fujin soon spotted an opportunity and thought, there. Quickly, he threw 3 shurikens in the winds. Due to the flow of the winds, they changed direction and were headed straight to the clone. The clone noticed that, and flickered 50 meters to his left. Fujin noticed the clone flickering and observed properly that direction and tossed another 3 shurikens out. Next, he performed projectile control jutsu and controlled all 6 of his shurikens to target his clone. Looking at the 6 shurikens heading at him, the clone kept using body flicker to dodge and waited for the right moment. It soon came and the clone prepared 2 spheres of wind and instantly launched wind explosion jutsu. The twin explosions destroyed 3 shurikens and threw 2 out of Fujin's control. However, Fujin directed the remaining shuriken on his clone, not allowing his clone any rest. The clone looked at the last shuriken and thought, trying to block it will be risky if he makes a sudden change in direction. I need a distraction. The clone moved backwards and slammed his hands on the ground and brought a rock shield up. Fujin changed the direction of the shuriken to curve around the boulder, but there was nothing behind there. He thought, damn, did he substitute or go underground, and flickered on a branch of nearby trees. He then fully activated his sensor mode and focused underground and sensed his clone. He thought, alright, just gotta wait till he surfaces, and prepared a wind sphere in each hand. The clone underground was heading straight up to Fujin to make a sneak attack. However, he sensed himself being sensed by Fujin and also the chakra built up for wind explosion jutsu. Damn, can't launch an attack now. I need to get out of the ground, my speed underground is much slower. But I don't think I can dodge his wind explosion jutsu. The analysis was done within fractions of a second, and the clone decided to leave the ground directly. Fujin, sensing his clone, flickered close to where his clone would surface. As soon as the clone's head popped out, Fujin launched both the spheres and started preparing more. The clone, whose head was barely above the ground, thought as expected and created a rock shield that he had already prepared. He had put much higher chakra into the rock shield, due to which, the shield was much larger and sturdier. The wind spheres clashed with the rock shield and exploded. The winds eroded the surface of the shield, but couldn't break through it. As soon as he saw the rock shield appearing from the ground, Fujin, who had already prepared 2 more wind spheres, flickered to get a better shot at the clone. Even before the rock shield was entirely erected, he was already adjacent to his clone and only around 10 meters away from him. The clone couldn't see Fujin flickering due to the rock shield, however, on seeing that he was so close to himself, he fired a couple shurikens on Fujin. Fujin saw the 2 shurikens shooting towards himself and thought, TCH. I don't want to engage them, and sent a wind sphere to counter them and launched the second one on the clone. The clone however flickered away and Fujin chased after him. Over the next minute, they flickered around at very high speed and tried to hit each other with wind explosion jutsu, shurikens or konaus. However, neither were successful. The clone found an opportunity to surround Fujin with 6 shurikens, and in the only direction that he could escape, the clone fired a couple of wind explosion jutsus. Fujin thought, damn, escaping normally will be risky. Let's go underground, and he entered the ground using Earth military movement jutsu. However, remembering his clone's earlier predicament, he didn't close the distance, but instead went in the opposite direction and kept sensing his clone and the wind spheres. He thought, alright, I now need a distraction for getting out of the ground. He prepared Great Breakthrough Jutsu. As soon as he got his head out of the ground, he saw the clone launching 2 wind spheres at him while manipulating 6 shurikens too. However, Fujin blew it all away with Great Breakthrough Jutsu. The clone itself was in the range and escaped underground. Fujin tracked his clone while thinking, I guess he'll try something similar as I did. I wonder if I could disrupt his underground movement. He then approached the place which was directly above the spot where his clone was and punched hard using chakra-infused punch. The ground cracked a bit. The clone underground felt the vibrations due to that punch, however it didn't cause any damage. Fujin thought, dang, that didn't work. Sigh, I guess I'm nowhere near Tsunade's level. He then flickered on a nearby tree and prepared 2 wind explosion jutsus while also readying himself to flicker away. As he waited for his clone to surface, he thought, I really need to learn a way to force someone out of the ground. The ones I can think of are that jutsu which Onaki's son used and maybe flooding the ground with water to restrict access to air. The clone on the other hand too was planning, that was close. If I was stronger, then that punch could have dispelled me. So what do I do now? I can sense my main body has prepared wind explosion jutsus and is waiting for me to pop out. I don't think that the rock shield will work very well this time. He was still noticing when he felt something. Wait, I can breathe. I see, the cracks in the ground due to that punch allowed some air to seep in. I guess that sucks for the main body. Also, though I never thought about it, it's surprising that a shadow clone needs to breathe. I wonder if Tobirama couldn't create shadow clone jutsu without adding the ability to breathe, or did he add it just to improve its efficiency to perform infiltration missions? If it's the latter, then I need to find a way to remove the breathing requirement of the shadow clone. That way shadow clones could stay underground for hours. Anyways, now that I don't have any time pressure, I'll just wait here till I can come up with something good. After all, I don't have anything to deal with someone hiding underground. Fujin on the other hand kept on waiting on a tree branch, for the clone to surface. After waiting for 5 minutes, his thoughts were, does a clone not need to breathe? Surely those cracks can't provide air all the way down, can it? Sigh, I really can't do anything. Only Mud Moat Jutsu can have a chance, but its range is too short to work. I wonder if my clone has some strategy, or is he just wasting time? He kept sensing the clone for another 5 minutes, and finally had enough and dispelled the clone. On getting the clone's memories, he sighed at the clone's tactic to wait patiently underground. Sigh, that's my clone all right. I remember that one Counter-Strike game I played in my previous life. Both my team and the enemies went at each other, and within 5 minutes all my teammates were dead and only 2 enemies were alive. They thought they won, but then realized that they still had one more to kill. Poor guys tried to find me for 5 minutes straight. And finally when they entered the cave I was hidden in, I killed them. A/N, this was my first attempt at writing a fight, please let me know how it was. Tips/criticisms are welcomed. Chapter 30, Combat Practice. Fujin began analyzing his spar. Well, ignoring the ending, the spar went quite well. However, it was mostly a mid-range fight. I used Great Breakthrough Jutsu and Wind Explosion Jutsu for offense, Projectile Control Jutsu to control the battlefield, Rock Shield Jutsu for defense and Body Flicker Jutsu and Earth Military Movement Jutsu for dodging. Wind Clones was another jutsu that could have been used, but we didn't due to the confusion it have created. Other jutsus didn't work in this fight. Actually, I did try to close the distance, however my clone ensured that we never got to fight in close range as he'd be dispelled with just one hit. So I couldn't use taijutsu or swords and I never got any opportunity to use wind propelling jutsu. And casting genjutsu in such a high-paced battle was just not possible with my current skills. As for the areas of concern, it's definitely underground battles. I don't have any way to deal with an underground enemy, apart from going underground myself. But I don't have any skill in fighting underground anyways, so that'd be disadvantageous for me. Also punching on the ground to crack it open is incredibly dumb. The enemy underground just gets better access to air. Apart from that, I also need a stronger offense. I guess I could have sent a kunai through the rock shield, but I couldn't do it with a wooden kunai. Either way, my current ninjutsu can't crack it. Also, I need to use flicker more properly. Both me and my clone at times flickered too far away. That kind of reset the tempo. I need to be able to estimate the right distance to flicker, so that I can continue my offense right away. I guess that'll take a lot of spars to get right. After analyzing, he summarized alright, in terms of mid-range combat, I surpass most of the genins that took part in the Chuunin exam in Naruto. Only Gaara would easily beat me and Temari and Shino might be able to compete. My speed is definitely faster than Lee with his weights on. And body flicker is probably on par with his weights off. But body flicker doesn't have the same flexibility, maneuverability, or even stamina that his natural speed has. As for my ninjutsu, Great Breakthrough Jutsu and Wind Explosion Jutsu are coming along really well. The Earth Release Jutsus worked as I thought they would. And I'm really surprised with the high usability that Projectile Control Jutsu provided. Though I can only control 8 shurikens max for the time being, it's still incredibly useful. He then thought about what improvements he should make. To improve power, I think I'd need to learn Fire Release Jutsus. After all, I don't have any access to higher rank jutsus for the time being. But me being able to use 3 elements will be very eye-catching. I guess I should wait till my genin squad is formed. If one of my teammates is able to use Fire Release, I can leave this for the future. Secondly, I think I should finally start learning Raise Non. And I also need to pack a lot of explosion tags. I wonder if I could attach an explosion tag to a kunao powered by Wind Chakra Flow. That way I could send a kunao through any defense the enemy puts up, and explode the tag when the enemy tries to dodge. As for flickering distance, it should improve with more spars. And underground combat I'll leave for later on as I don't have access to anything that'll help me combat it. I also need to improve the way I carry my weapons. I should try to inscribe some storage seals on the weapon pouches. Maybe even go a step further and make a wristband with multiple storage seals to get what I want instantly. Anyways, I also need to test out close range combat and see how it goes. He finally stopped analyzing and made another shadow clone. This time the rules were to fight in close range. So Great Breakthrough and Breakthrough Jutsus weren't allowed, and staying underground for more than a few seconds also wasn't allowed. Flickering was restricted to 10 meters. Both Fujin and his clone stood 20 meters apart, and Fujin tossed a pebble in the air. As soon as the pebble hit the ground, Fujin rushed towards his clone. However, his clone quickly prepared and launched a wind explosion jutsu. Fujin sidestepped the wind sphere, and continued moving towards the clone. As soon as the clone saw Fujin sidestepping, he exploded the wind sphere. But, as Fujin had continued rushing past it, he didn't take any damage, and just felt strong winds on his back. He then slashed his sword, aiming to slice the clone's neck. The clone, not having time to grab his own swords, infused chakra in his fist and blocked it with the back of his fist. He then flickered behind and grabbed both of his swords. Not wanting to give his clone the opportunity, Fujin threw one of his swords straight towards his clone at a very high speed. Since the clone was still in the air, he twisted his hand to face towards his left and caused a wind burst, which propelled him to the right. Fujin followed up by launching 3 shurikens on the clone and then used wind retrieving jutsu to get his sword back and also approached his clone. The clone quickly used Gale Surge Jutsu to defend against the incoming shurikens, and then engaged Fujin in a sword fight. Over the past few months, Fujin had trained a lot in Kenjutsu. He had developed a combat style that was very overbearing and relentless. However, he had also trained in defending properly with the swords. Fujin and his clone clashed repeatedly with swords. Fujin was more on the offense, whereas his clone was more on the defense and repeatedly used wind-propelling jutsu or body flicker jutsu to avoid getting hit. In the next 30 seconds, the clone managed to graze his sword on Fujin's left arm and right cheek. However, Fujin soon created an opportunity by using wind-propelling jutsu along with body flicker and got a good hit on the clone, which dispelled the clone. Fujin sighed, merely a minute of fighting before the clone dispelled. Also, though I managed to dodge the 2 hits from my clone, if the clone had used a real sword, then it would have cut my skin. If the swords were enhanced by wind chakra flow, it could have left deep cuts, probably all the way to the bone. Worse, if it were poisoned, it might have incapacitated me. So there's a lot of scope for improvement. Actually, my clone has to avoid each and every hit as he'll be dispelled. That's good, I should probably start doing the same. And then I need to see how I can maintain an all-out offense while avoiding getting hit. There was also the issue of my clone having to block the sword strike with his fist. Even though it was infused with chakra, I'll still take a lot of damage if I do that against a real sword. So I should try to get gloves with a metal plate on the back hand. That would give me another way of defending. I guess my taijutsu needs an upgrade too. While the academy style is good, it ain't enough. Right now, despite putting way less time in it, my kenjutsu completely overwhelms my taijutsu. I wonder which taijutsu style will suit me more. If I don't find anything good over the next year or two, I could approach Guy and ask him to teach me his style. While he ain't dumb as many think, but manipulating him should be doable. Speaking of Guy, I'm surprised that I haven't seen him even once. Granted that I train in only a small part of the village, it's still surprising to never have run into him in over 4 years. Then again, I haven't seen many other canon characters either. Do they gather someplace elsewhere, or is Konoha so short on manpower that everyone has to constantly do missions? Anyways, this sparring has been really good. I should continue doing it. He then made another shadow clone and continued his spars. Over the next 3 weeks, Fujin sparred with his clone on a daily basis. His combat skills improved greatly over this period. After 3 weeks, he stopped using wooden weapons and began using real ones. The clone however had to fight carefully, to ensure that he didn't critically injure Fujin. The spars got very risky after Fujin started using chakra flow to enhance the swords. In merely 2 months, Fujin ruined 4 swords, 13 kunaus, and 33 shurikens due to these spars. He ran out of the weapons he collected from the forest and had to buy from shops. In all it cost him slightly over 120k ryo on these weapons. However, he didn't bother with the money lost. His thoughts were, what's the use of having money if I don't use it to get stronger? But I guess I should be glad that I did learn Fuinjutsu. I still have over 225k ryo left with me. Right around the same time when he began sparring with real weapons, he also began learning Raise-Non. The first and second stages were learnt long back. He finally started on the 3rd stage. One of the biggest issues in Raise-Non training was that he couldn't allow anyone to see it. If someone interrupted him or caught him training in forests and figured out his disguise, he could make up some reasons like practicing to fight while using transformation. Or that a ninja had to keep his weapons hidden and hence he planned to keep his skill hidden until there was no choice. While the reasons may cause a bad impression, he didn't care much about that. But for Raise-Non, if someone caught him training that, then it'd be a big trouble. The only usable excuse he had right now, was that he could say, I figured it out myself after reading about the 4th Hokage. However, that would paint him as an absolute genius and perhaps earn him some visits from root ninjas or even from Shimura Danzo himself. Not to mention that they'd keep a much stricter watch on him. So for Raise-Non, he decided to train at home. His senses had honed enough by now to realize if someone spies on him. So if he senses anyone spying on him, he could drop the Raise-Non training and instead show that he was training Wind Explosion Jutsu instead. To train Raise-Non, he cleared up his living room. He only left a sofa in the living room, and moved everything else into the bedroom and began the training. The compression and shaping part was quite difficult. He tried for a few hours without any success. He sighed and thought, let me first do it the Naruto way. And he made a shadow clone with 20% of his chakra. The clone suppressed and shaped the Raise-Non. In this manner, he was able to learn Raise-Non within a couple of hours. However, he understood that depending on a clone to make Raise-Non is very inefficient and began training for Raise-Non without using any clones. It took him a month and a half to get the jutsu right, but it was done. Over the remaining few days, Fujin decided to improve his Raise-Non. He wanted to reduce the amount of time required to form it and increase the amount of chakra he could put in it.